HatLag is a program developed by Duz's username in early 2020 that lets you lag the game for exactly 0.4 seconds with just the press of a button. This is a much easier and more fair way to induce lag than methods used before. Prior to HatLag, we had to induce lag via the in-game menu by changing language settings or the graphics settings, and the time this takes is different for every computer. This means that better computers save time in the run due to less time spent lagging, and on top of that, if your computer was too good, the game would not lag for long enough, making some tricks fail. Needless to say, that's all pretty unfair, but this program standardizes the amount of time it takes to lag, making all tricks fair game. This does come with the side effect of making some lag tricks save time that otherwise would not save time, due to not needing to navigate a menu anymore, and making some impossible tricks possible. But back in March 2020, it was decided that this trade-off was worth it, and the program has been legal since. History aside, what exactly can you do with this lag? Well... But before you can do any of that, you have to install HatLag, so let's go over how to do that. To get HatLag, you'll want to be in the Boop Troop, which is the speedrunning server for this game. If you're not already in here, there's an invite link in the description. And you'll want to find the resources channel near the top here. And scroll down a little bit and find this speedrun utility zip. And you want to do that with this. You'll also want to have an extracting program like 7-zip or WinRAR. Once you have this, you'll want to navigate inside Run Essentials here and find the HatLag folder. And you're just gonna drag this wherever you like. You can put it on your desktop. I'm just gonna drag it into this folder as an example. And here inside HatLag, there are two versions of it that you can use. The difference is in input handling. So the 1200 Hz one has better input handling, but it uses a lot more of your CPU. So if you're experiencing performance issues when you're using this one, then try the other one instead. So the first time you launch this program, it should look like this, but the first time you launch it, Windows might give you a warning. And if that happens, you have to click like read more or show more. And after you click that, then it will give you the option to run. So now that you have the program open, you're going to want to launch your game. I'm going to be using my DLC 2 with mods patch. And when you're in game here on the title screen, you can just press down R on your keyboard, and you can notice if the game stutters when you're pressing down R, that means HatLag is working. Now before we go in game, I'll show you how to manage your binds for HatLag, and how to bind it to your controller as well. So you don't actually have to close your game to make changes to this, which is nice. So you want to go into your HatLag folder, and find the key binds and the readme. You want to open those up, and inside the readme you'll find this link in the middle. It'll take you to this list of key codes that you'll be using in the keybinds file. And this file looks like gibberish. It's not hard to understand though. It's one line per bind, so this is one bind, this is a second bind, and the left part here is just the key code from the website. And then there's a colon as a separator, and then 400 is just the lag duration, and that's the only duration you're allowed to use. So if you go down this list, you'll see that the default binds provided are right shift, R, and for some reason T. Not sure why T is on here, but right shift is what you'll be using on controller, and R is what most people use as their default lag for keyboard. And I'm not sure why T is here. You can just get rid of T. To remove a bind, you just delete the line. And if you're on keyboard and you don't like the idea of having your lag on R and you want to move it somewhere else, then you can do that. You want to make sure it's a comfortable button to reach because you're going to be using it a lot. So let's say, for example, I don't want to have it on R and I want to put it on V instead. So again, to remove a bind, you just delete the line, like that. And to create a new bind, I just find the button in the list. So here's the V key, so I take this one, and create a new line, paste that in here. And then I just add the 400 part, like that. And now I have removed R, and I've added V instead. And you can just save the file, or just save it, Control S, and then you will reload the program. So you just close the program and open it again. And now when you go in game, you should be able to lag with the new button you created. So I don't actually want to do this though, so I'm gonna undo that and just keep R. Now if you're on keyboard, you're good to go now, and you can skip this next part by using the timestamps in the description. But if you're on controller, you're going to want to find your game in your Steam library, and you want to make sure your controller is plugged in here, and find the controller layout button, or this button. They both do the same thing. And you want to go to Edit Layout. And now you need to choose the button that you want to use as your lag button. And again, you're going to be using this button a lot, so you want to make sure it's a button that's comfortable to reach. So let's say, for example, I want to bind lag to my right bumper. So I find buttons here on the left, and I find the right bumper, and I click this thing, and then I go to keyboard up here, and I select right shift. If you want to bind it to your touchpad, you go into here to the trackpads, and you want to make sure all three of them are set to single button, and all three of them are set to the right shift key. So now you can close out of this window, and you'll be able to use lag by pressing down the button you chose in the controller layout. Now that the general setup is done, I'll go over all the previously shown lag tricks and how to perform them. I don't recommend trying to learn them all at once, and rather you should come back to this video learning one or maybe two at a time. Learn at your own pace, and keep in mind some tricks are harder than others. Lag SDJs, DSJs, and TSJs are pretty easy to understand. You basically just use lag to extend the distance you travel in coyote time before whatever trick you're doing. These are sometimes easier to perform than the normal versions of the tricks, especially when you're used to it, though keep in mind that if you're lagging for all of your sprint head tech, then you will be losing time. Generally, it's good to use these for some of the riskier jumps that save a chunk of time to make them more consistent, but not for small optimizations. So first off, let's look at a Lag DSJ. Lag DSJs are very simple to perform. You just sprint towards the ledge, you press lag when you're close to it, you keep holding sprint in the direction you're running in, and as soon as the lag ends, you press jump twice. Just like that. It's exactly like a normal DSJ, except you lag before you go off the ledge, and then you perform the jump after the lag. The most common mistake people make when learning this is pressing jump too early, which looks like this. If you're playing on keyboard, you can actually buffer the first jump, which makes the trick a little bit more lenient, but on controller, you have to let the lag end before the first jump input. The lag duration is always the same, so this is simply a matter of practicing and getting used to the timing. Next, let's look at a Lag TSJ. A Lag TSJ is performed basically the same way as a Lag DSJ. You sprint, and then you lag when you're close to the ledge, and then you perform the inputs of the TSJ when the lag ends. Just like that. This is definitely harder than a Lag DSJ, simply because inputting a TSJ is harder than inputting a DSJ, but the lag part of the trick is mechanically the exact same. Again, the most common mistake here is doing your TSJ inputs too early. You have to allow the lag to end before you start doing jumps. Now, let's look at a Lag SDJ. If you're on controller, the Lag SDJ works practically the same way as the previous two tricks, but if you're on keyboard, they're a bit more complicated. Use the timestamps in the description to skip to the keyboard section of this trick if you're playing on keyboard. On controller, Lag SDJs are very simple. Sprint, when you're close to the ledge, you press lag. During the lag, release sprint, and when the lag ends, press jump. Just like that. On top of giving you more distance, you also have the full duration of the coyote time to press jump, which is a lot longer than the 2 frames you have with a regular SDJ. Here's what happens if you press jump too early. You have to allow the lag to end before you press jump. If this happens to you, then you didn't release sprint. You have to release sprint during the lag. And if this happens to you, then your lag was too far off the ledge. You have to lag before you go off the ledge, not after you go off the ledge. Now let's look at how to lag SDJ on keyboard. If you're on keyboard and you try to lag SDJ the way a controller player can, you'll find that it is much more difficult, like that one did not work. Luckily, there is a different method that works on keyboard, but it's a little bit more complicated and requires some input setup, so here are the changes you have to make to your inputs. For this trick, you need to have at least one of your quick hat switch binds on your scroll wheel. I recommend just putting them both on it. As you can see on my input display, scroll up, switches my hats in this direction, and scroll down switches them in the other direction. To achieve this, you'll want to bind hat hotkey left to button ID 256 and hat hotkey right to ID 257. You will also want to make sure hat player zoom in and zoom out are not bound to your scroll wheel, as this will interfere with the hat switching. And you will want to bind zoom in to some other button, which you can then use to scroll down in menus. So here's an example of binds that have everything I mentioned, and that should make a keyboard Lag SDJ work. If you need a refresher on how to rebind, watch my rebinding guide linked in the description. And now that you have this set up, let's move on to the actual trick. To perform a Lag SDJ on keyboard, sprint forwards and press lag when you're near the ledge, like so. During the lag, you'll do two things. One, you're going to scroll down to switch your hat, and you don't have to worry about scrolling down exactly one notch, as you notice if I press lag and then scroll down a bunch, it's only going to switch the hat once. And second, you're going to hold jump. If you perform this all correctly, hat kid should be switched to a brewer hat and should be traveling through the air with sprint speed. Like so. Now all you have to do is scroll back up one notch while you're in the air to switch back to your sprint hat. Note that you can keep hat ability pressed down the whole time while performing a Lag SDJ on keyboard. You can also release it during the lag if you'd like, and it's recommended to do this if you find yourself accidentally throwing brewer potions after your Lag SDJs. With all that in mind, here's how you perform a Lag SDJ again, and here's what it looks like with all of the details I mentioned. If you fail a keyboard Lag SDJ, it's a bit hard to pinpoint what exactly went wrong. Generally, it just means you messed up the inputs in some way. Just keep practicing it. Lag clips work by buffering a vault right after you lag. The specifics on how this works I don't exactly know, but the main thing that makes it work is the fact that the game removes your collision while you're vaulting. Lag clips depend on the ledge you're vaulting on and are usually simple to perform, but some ledges are particularly hard to grab correctly and therefore quite hard to clip through. Now let's look at how to actually perform a lag clip. Lag clips are pretty simple to perform on controller and are not hard to do on keyboard either. On controller, all you have to do is jump towards a ledge, and before you're about to grab it, press lag and hold jump during the lag. Just like that. On keyboard, there is one extra layer to lag clipping, and that is you need to be holding down jump before you press lag. Generally, this means that you will be holding down jump as part of a previous jump input, and then you will use that to lag clip. For example, for this clip, I can do a sprint jump when I reach this tile on the floor, and keep jump held down the whole time. When I'm close to the ledge, I press lag, and then the lag clip should work. Just like that. For another example, and this is a common way to lag clip in general, I can walk off the ledge and then press and hold jump to double jump back towards the ledge, and then press lag to lag clip. Just like that. And again, if you're on controller, you don't have to worry about having jump held before pressing lag. The inputs for lag clips are relatively straightforward, so if you're failing it, it's most likely because of your positioning or your velocity, or both. This is something you just get down with enough practice. Also remember that every ledge is different, and that means that some lag clips are way harder than others. For example, this one right here is actually pretty difficult. One of the hardest in the game, actually. When you're learning and practicing lag clips, the best spot to do them in is out of bounds in Yakuza, as this type of lag clip where you run off and then jump back up is one of the most common types of lag clips in the game. Lagshots are the coolest lag tech in the game. When you start an ice hat slingshot and lag right after you hit the ground, HatKit will stop moving but still build up speed, letting you gain tons of speed on very small slopes. This makes ice hat slingshots a lot more useful and versatile as they go faster and can be done in more places. To perform a lag shot, you simply perform an ice hat slingshot except you add in a lag press. You want to press lag as soon as the ice hat hits the slope, and you keep holding down the ice hat. Like that. As you saw, when the lag ends, you'll get launched down the slope really quickly, and you have to react and perform the ice hat slingshot inputs at the right time as you leave the ledge. Like so. A good way to practice the timing is by using this roof in Mafia Town, as you can start from up here when you're starting out. And then, as you're getting more comfortable with the timing, you can try starting from lower down and see if you can still react. About here is as low as you can go, and if you can do it from here, then you're good. Keep in mind though that with this slope in particular, this part of the roof is a little bit buggy, and sometimes you will lose your speed here or get completely stuck. and that is usually not your fault. That's just relevant for the slope in particular. Something you want to keep in mind if you're playing on keyboard is that you will still kind of get a lag shot if you let go of ISAT during the lag, like this. And you want to be careful to avoid doing that because you cannot perform 2 jumps if you do this. So basically just make sure you're not letting go of the ISAT during the lag. Here are some common mistakes people make. If you're not getting a whole lot of speed, but you are getting a little bit of speed, then that means you pressed lag before the ISAT hit the ground. You need the ISAT to hit the ground first, and then you can press lag. If you're on controller and you're not getting any speed at all and it looks like this, then that means you let go of ISAT during the lag. You need to hold down ISAT throughout the entire lag. Just remember the timing of releasing the ISAT is not related to the lag, but is rather related to when you leave the platform. If you are getting speed, but you're not getting 2 jumps, then you're doing the ISAT slingshot inputs too early or too late. Here's an example of too early. And here's an example of too late. You need to remember from learning normal ISAT slingshots that the timing for releasing the ISAT and pressing jump starts right after you leave the platform when you enter coyote time. If you're really struggling with this tech, then you should practice normal ISAT slingshots without the lag to get the timing and the positioning down, as adding in the lag makes you travel much faster and it's much harder to react. Once you're decent at performing normal lag shots, there's a different type of lag shot too, called a slam lag shot. These are performed off of very small slopes like this one, where there's also a different surface right underneath it. These look a little bit weird, but mechanically they work the exact same way. All you have to know is that you are waiting to leave the bottom platform, not the top one. You let the ISAT fall all the way down to the bottom platform, and then you do the inputs when you leave that ledge. Lag dive boosts are a little bit niche. They give you slightly more speed than a normal dive boost, but on flat ground they are not faster due to the time it takes to lag. Lag dive boosts have 2 main applications. The first is using the lag to buffer your dive boost to be on the first possible frame so you can Lagwarp later. And the second is to carry more speed out of the dive boost if you're going to be airborne for a while afterwards, such as off of steep ledges or into balloons. If you're on keyboard, lag dive boosts are quite simple, but if you're on controller, they're a little more complicated. Use the timestamps in the description to skip to the controller section of this trick if you're on controller. On keyboard, all you have to do is dive, and then before you hit the ground you press lag, and then you hold dive during the lag. Note that you can be much more greedy with the lag timing than you'd think, and the earlier you can lag, the better. If you don't get a dive boost and instead you roll out on the ground, then you either did not hold dive during the lag, or you were not holding a movement direction towards the angle of your dive. If you don't get a dive boost and instead you get a dive cancel in the air, then your lag was too early. This is called a lag dive cancel, and that does have its own uses, usually as a backup to make a jump work that otherwise barely would have failed. These are inputted the exact same way as a lag dive boost, just in the air, so keep that knowledge in mind. Now let's look at how to lag dive boost on controller. On controller, lag dive boosts are a bit of a pain to set up. First off, you need to close the game and go into the keyboard.ini file and add a second button to dive with. This can be any non-modifier key, and this is not a key you'll actually be pressing on your keyboard, so you don't have to worry about it being comfortable to reach. I'll use H as an example. After you've bound your second dive button, you go into the controller configuration in Steam and pick a button to use as your lag dive boost button. Keep in mind you want to reliably be able to perform the following inputs. Again, you might need to move some of your in-game binds in the ini file for your controller to make this work. Here's an example setup that has everything I just mentioned. If you've set up this bind correctly, you should be able to press it down on your controller, and the game will switch to keyboard and you will crouch like that. Now that the bind is finally set up, here's how you perform a lag dive boost on controller. First you want to dive, and then before you hit the ground you press lag. And during the lag, you're going to hold down the new lag dive boost button. This is enough for the lag dive boost itself, but you want to add in 2 more things. After the lag, try to release the new button as soon as possible, and as soon as you release it, also immediately press your normal dive button. The earlier you release the button, the less speed you lose. Remember though that you must allow the lag to end before you can release the button. And pressing down your normal dive is to fix an input handling problem that can sometimes make your next dive input not work. Just press your normal dive right after you release the Lag Diveboost button while you're still traveling through the air. This whole motion can take some time to get comfortable with. If you don't get a dive boost and instead you slide or you roll out on the ground, it's pretty hard to tell what exactly went wrong, but you messed up the inputs in some way. Just keep practicing and you'll get it down. If you're really struggling, practice just the first part of the inputs until you can do that comfortably, and then add in the second part. Once you're comfortable with lag dive boosts, note that you can be much more greedy with the lag timing than you'd think, and the earlier you lag, the better. If you don't get a dive boost and instead you get a dive cancel in the air, then your lag was too early. This is called a lag dive cancel, and that does have its own uses, usually as a backup to make a jump work that otherwise barely would have failed. These are inputted the exact same way as a lag dive boost, just in the air, so keep that knowledge in mind. Lagwarps are, yeah. By lagging and jumping at the same time for a while, you can trick the game into thinking you're stuck, triggering the anti-soft lock mechanic known as stuck warping wherever you want. When utilized correctly, this lets you effectively teleport back to somewhere you've already been whenever you want to. This is very useful for open levels such as Golden Vault and heating up Mafia Town. Before you can Lagwarp, you need to do some input setup. You need to choose a lettered keyboard button to use as your Lagwarp button. If you're on controller, just pick any letter that you aren't using for anything else. I'll be using G as an example. Now you want to bind jump to this key, but you do it through the developer console instead of the game files. Make sure the developer console is enabled in your game settings, and then open the console by pressing tab. This brings up a little bar at the bottom of the screen, and here you type in set bind, space, the key you want to use, space, jump. So for me, that'll be set bind G jump. And then just hit enter. Now if you press down this key, you should jump. And now all you have to do is bind lag to the same button. Go back in the video if you don't remember how to do that. After that's done, when you press down the button, you should lag and jump at the same time. If you play on controller, you also have to bind this keyboard key to your controller, using the Steam controller configuration. Here's a setup with everything I mentioned as an example. Now that all the setup is done, here's how to actually do the trick. There are two types of Lagwarps, ones you do off of unsafe surfaces, and ones you do off of safe surfaces. The unsafe surface ones are easier and what you should learn first. Get into Mafia Town and find an ice head platform or a faucet, stand a little bit away from it, and then jump onto it. Ice head platforms and faucets are unsafe surfaces, so your safe spot is still set to where you were standing before you jumped. Lagwarping will bring you back there. To Lagwarp from an unsafe surface, stand completely still and then press the Lagwarp button 3 times. You want to time these presses so that the game will consistently keep lagging. If you press 3 times and she doesn't warp, then your rhythm was off. If HatKid does a full jump in the air, you are pressing it too quickly. This is also why you should learn to time it rather than spamming mindlessly. You might also be pressing the button too slowly, though it can be hard to notice. When performed correctly, the game should only be showing you 1 frame in between lags. A good way to tell is by looking at the in-game timer. If the last digit changes, then you were too slow. You can see it stayed as a 1 the whole time there, so that worked. But if I press too slowly, you can see it's not working. This timing is something you just have to practice and get used to. If you're really struggling to make this work, then try switching to a different HatLag and see if it makes a difference. When you're comfortable with the unsafe surface Lagwarps, you can start trying safe surface Lagwarps. For these, the surface you're Lagwarping on will become your safe spot if you're too slow on any of the presses, and then you won't be able to warp back. You can practice these anywhere, just jump forward on regular ground, and before you land, let go of every input and just start pressing the Lagwarp button in the same rhythm as before. You'll have to keep pressing the button until it works, which will usually take at least 5 presses, since HatKid needs to stop moving before the warp actually starts. As long as you start lagging before you touch the ground, and you keep up the correct rhythm, you will not set a new safe spot and the warp will succeed. To minimize the amount of times you need to press the button, try to stop as much of HatKid's momentum as you can before you start pressing it. This can be tricky and risky to optimize though, so be careful. Here's one final trick for our keyboard players. You might remember that controller players can lag clip without needing jump held before the lag. which actually makes some lag clip setups only work on controller, but you can actually do this on keyboard too if you use your Lagwarp key to lag clip. Simply go to a ledge like you normally do for lag clip, but instead of holding jump and pressing lag, just tap your Lagwarp key. Examples where this can be useful is this clip in Murder, and for this clip in Yakuza. And with that, I'm finally done with everything I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, ask in the comments, or better, ask in the BoopTube Discord where people are more likely to see and respond to you quicker. This is by far the longest amount of time I've put into any video ever, so I'm very happy to finally put this out. Good luck and have fun learning. Also, tell me if there's anything you wish there was a guide for, and I might make one in the future. See ya!